All right. Amanda, I
Hi.
think we are live.
Whoa.
Live on Instagram, live on YouTube. Probably, give me just a second. So I need a last thumbs up. Let's see. Let's see. We are live. We got a thumbs up. So,
Okay.
Amanda, thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
No,
How are
no.
you?
So great. So great. Feel wonderful,
Oh.
and it's great to see you.
It is a huge pleasure to share this virtual stage with you. Okay.
Yeah.
So, uh, for those who don't know who Amanda Deitch is,
Mhm.
give a small introduction, your background, uh, so we can start sharing some thoughts about detox, which will be the main subject today.
Okay. So my background, gosh. Well, should we talk about it in terms of the DeRose method background, or how do
Okay, okay, I'm gonna
I've
give you a
reached a
few
certain
hints.
age, no, there's a very long background.
Don't worry. So correct me if I'm wrong. You are an architect, right?
I am.
Yes, so do I. Okay, so we are
Of course, we
architects.
know that. That's right.
Besides that, you traveled the world and you lived in different places. You were
I
born in the
have.
USA,
Yeah.
raised in London,
I
if
was
I'm not
raised in
wrong.
London and for about 10 years. Yeah, I was in the UK for about 10 years growing up. And then
Hmm.
I was in Italy for my first studies where I trained as a painting restorer. I then worked in New York for about 8 years for Sotheby's. Actually, I worked for them for a very long time. I started as an intern when I was maybe 18 in Florence when I was studying. Then I worked for a year in London. Then I went to work for them in New York. And I did architecture a little bit later, actually. I moved back to London in the early 90s during a
Great.
very bad recession. And it was time to
Very
find a
good.
new route, as we need to do in life sometimes. And I had always wanted to study as an architect. I'd always been fascinated by the built world. And so I thought, okay, this is the moment. And yeah, I loved it. I studied at the Architectural Association in London, made some very close friends with whom I am still in touch, even though we're a little scattered because it's a very international school. And then I worked really for the next 25 years in both interior design mostly and also as an art consultant. And until I moved to Savannah. But during this
Tell me,
period,
tell me, tell
I
me.
had a parallel existence with with our method, with Duro's method. And I fell in love with it after in my very first class, which I believe was in 2006.
Great.
Yeah,
Awesome.
quite some time
No,
ago. Nearly 20 years.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Very good. Amanda, I'm gonna grab the that traveling around the world or living in different
Mm.
places to start our conversation
Yeah, I
regarding
think
food.
for food,
Okay.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So we know that the United States, they don't have, in a general view, um, they are not the icon of healthy food.
No.
It is more the icon of fast food, which usually is not healthy food. Even though when I lived in New York, I had access to great food. You just need to search, right?
There is. There's access to great food, there's access to great produce.
Yeah.
And I think that there's been a big change, I guess, since when I was born. I had two American parents, and I was raised with a mother who would never let me eat anything out of a package. So unlike what you think of as that sort of typical American diet, I was not allowed potato chips. I wasn't allowed sodas. I wasn't allowed candy. Not in a sort of puritanical way. I mean, treats sometimes,
Hmm.
occasionally, but I guess she must have been quite an early proponent of healthy
Lucky
eating
you.
because lucky me, because that was how it was. And then actually growing up, when we moved to England, we actually moved to the countryside, and most we ate mostly vegetables from our garden that was seasonal. And you couldn't, in those days, it wasn't very easy to get a lot of foods that were not in season in England.
Hmm. Got it.
So you really cooks really cooked with the season of the foods. Yeah,
Yeah. You don't
a different
decide
time.
what you eat depending on your wishes,
No,
more about what is available, what is there
that's right.
to pick up,
Yeah,
not even
absolutely.
if it's there, but if it's not ready, you need to wait.
Yeah.
Right. So it is an amazing way of approaching food when you have that reference.
Yeah.
And then we have Italy
Mhm.
on your history. And Italy is
I've
such an
just come back.
amazing, yeah.
I was there a
And
couple days ago.
yeah, I have to admit that recently I went to Italy. I went to Florence for New Year's Eve, and one of my friends, she's vegan, and I thought, how hard will it be for her to eat in the country of cheese? Okay, that or pasta and cheese. And I need to say that it was quite the opposite. I
Mm,
had an amazing experience because I noticed that the guys that were um, the waiters, they have full knowledge of the recipes the other guys were cooking in the kitchen. So they were able to say, yeah, don't worry, that's vegan. No, I can change this pasta because it has
yeah.
egg to and this other one that doesn't. And so they had this knowledge of the ingredients, the way of preparing that was stunning. Stunning. I was so impressed how easy it was because of this detail. Did you have the same experience where you studied there, or it was something different at the time for you?
Well, when I was studying, I was not yet, I mean, I used to eat meat. So,
Hmm.
I mean, when I was 18 or 19, I wasn't raised I was very much raised to eat everything.
Hmm.
And I think it was something that I look back on now, which was a really, really good thing
Hmm.
because it meant that when you really, as a child, were taught that, I grew up at a time when, in some ways, the Second World War was the repercussions of it economically were still being felt.
Yeah.
And um, you ate everything. And
Hmm.
the good thing about that was that I think it allows you a kind of openness. It allows you an openness to ideas, and particularly Italian food, because even though in those days I wasn't a vegetarian and or plant-based as we say now, I I have been for many years, and I've never had any difficulties when I go to Italy. And I think one of the reasons is that the diet tends to be, it is the Mediterranean diet. It's very rich in fruits, vegetables, greens. It also includes meat and fish, but it's not a diet which is heavily meat based and then might have a little bit of something green thrown in. It's quite the
Yeah.
opposite. And so, and also, I think, and I would imagine with your friend where it's even a little bit more complicated, there's such a passion and love of food
Yeah.
that unless you encounter the wrong person, and particularly people working in restaurants, they kind of get excited by a little challenge.
Yeah.
you know, and they really want to make sure that it tastes good. So they
Hmm.
will adapt and just change things. You know, maybe they would maybe use some butter somewhere, they'll throw in some olive oil, you know, or
Yeah.
um, there are just lots of little tricks that can be used. Yeah. So
Yes.
it's,
Yeah. That's so true. So true. So tell me, Amanda, for you, when did uh, seeking for a healthy diet became something or became more important in your life? What happened? What were the things that, because I know that you care a lot about your nutrition, you
I
do a lot
do.
of experience yourself, like you're always trying new things, better things for your body,
Mm,
for yourself,
yeah.
for your well-being. So what happened in your life and what happened, like the journey since then? Tell me.
So I think several things happened. One was that I was very conscious from a young age about heart disease. We have a
Hmm.
history. I have a very bad, a very, very serious history of heart disease in my family on my father's line, of which I have not escaped the genetic load that that comes
Hmm.
with. So, despite you know, outward appearances, whatever, I have certain things I need to be careful of and be conscious of.
Hmm.
So when I was much younger, I think I started to think about cutting red meats out of my diet when I was younger. And then I actually found out that really all meat has certain negative effects. I also became very conscious about, so that was directly related to sort of heart disease side of
Hmm.
things. But I also became very conscious of industrial farming.
Hmm.
I also had a moment where my daughter had a very serious injury to her foot. She was in hospital for about 3 weeks, and I was there with her, obviously. And, you know, it was serious. And she had to be on intravenous antibiotics for about 2 weeks. And I became aware that if this was, you know, 80 years ago or 100 years ago, my daughter probably would have died. And she also
Yeah.
probably would have lost her foot first. I mean, it was very ugly. And today she's healthy and well. And I was aware that it was the antibiotics that saved her life. And I became very aware also about the use of antibiotics in industrial food with for animals. And it became very important to me to not participate in that. I felt
Hmm.
so grateful that I felt, gosh, that's the least I can do. And it, you know, then you move on to the discussion. People would often say, yes, but, you know, why don't you just eat organic meat or something, you know? And if people make their own decisions, so that's, but my feeling was that that was actually quite difficult to do because you go, if you socialize, you go to a restaurant or you go to someone's house, you really don't know what you're eating
Yeah.
unless you're buying it yourself. Um, so ultimately, in a way, what happened with me, Nuno, is I got to a point where I couldn't understand why I would eat meat.
Hmm.
Not, you know, other than it tasted good.
Yeah.
And even today, often people will say to me, "Oh, well, we know you don't like that." I'm like, "No, no, no, you don't understand. I like everything. I just don't eat it. It's not the
Yeah.
same thing." Um, but also, what I think is really fascinating for anyone who is considering a plant-based diet, one of the things I remember was, you know, when you when you do eat meat, it tends to be you tend to eat food that is heavily kind of has a lot of salt in it and there's certain things that we get very attached to, and you think often, how would I ever not eat these foods? And nature is very kind. And so one of the things that I think you and I could possibly bring up is that when you change what you eat, you also change what you like.
Yeah.
It's just a sort of the two things kind of go hand in hand. Um, and so luckily, I think we're very lucky that way. Um, and I hate to say it, if we only ate dog food, we'd probably like dog food.
Yeah.
Well, depending on what one feeds one's dog. um,
Mhm.
but so yes, it was a slow journey. It was a slow journey, and for me, because a lot of people who decide not to eat meat anymore do it from one day to the next, and
Mhm.
um, and other people have a sort of a longer journey. And I was one of the people who had a much longer journey. There were a
Okay.
whole series. I gradually took one thing out, I took another thing out, I took another thing out, and each time they were sort of for different reasons. I think the first thing I stopped eating was shellfish years ago, and because I developed an allergy, I just couldn't eat it anymore. So
Mhm.
they were. And then I realized, I think I was down to just sort of eating chicken, and I suddenly said, you know what? I'm only doing this to be polite. I actually don't want to eat it anymore. And um, and that was a difficult step to
Mhm.
take, and it meant creating a new paradigm in my mind about who I was and who I wanted to be, um, confronting an aspect of myself which many people have, which is people pleasing.
Yeah.
And it sort of came up. I realized I was doing something that I no longer felt I could really identify with, and I continued to do it for the wrong reasons. And and today, if I felt strongly that it was the right thing for me to do to begin to eat meat again, but I would happily step into that place and say that's what I need to do. So I think that one's relationship with food is a very interesting one.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, especially if you were raised in the way I was. I think less so today. We're much more tolerant about what people eat, but I was raised where you ate everything, and
Yeah.
so to start saying no was quite difficult.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. I remember one of the last conversations we had in person. I was visiting Savannah. You remember?
Yeah,
I went to
of
your house.
course. I wish you'd come
And
back. We had such a nice time. It was
I
lovely.
will, I will. But I do remember you were talking about on the place that you live, there was this movement of having available more healthy food, but then the taste wasn't good, right?
I know.
I remember that you were saying it was awful. It was not,
Oh, there was one place that was so it didn't last very long, thank goodness, but it was so terrible.
yeah. But it's so interesting because sometimes people think about a plant-based diet because you're taking out the meat products, you're taking out the main flavor, and it needs to be poor in flavor. Lots of people can think about that, and it's kind of a logical way of thinking. Like if you like to eat, for example, meat, and you take out the meat, you're going to take out all of my pleasure, so all of the flavor, and then you just take the rest. Uh, but that's not the case,
It's
right?
not the case. Not at all.
There's the spices and how, the world for years and years and centuries, spices were the gold or
Yes,
the oil of that
absolutely.
era. It was so important to bring spices from different places of the world, and they have such a huge value to our tasting of the food,
They
how it
do.
really tastes.
Mm,
And
I think,
tell
no,
me,
the other thing that I think is so important is that that the use of spices, condiments, homemade ones, um, they do several things. They brighten our food. I always think about it that way. They add that little um, nuanced flavor that you catch. and that complexity that you're looking for in a recipe, a complexity of flavors which makes it enticing, delicious. The other thing is that nutritionally, they totally vamp up what you're eating, which is
Yeah.
so important because, as we know, we don't, our the way in which hunger is driven is actually related to nutrients. And when your body is getting adequate nutrients, you don't necessarily need to eat a lot of food. And the body responds to all those nutrients and has a sense of satiety, of being satisfied.
Hmm.
So it's this double thing where, you know, I mean, you can probably see my face light up when I talk. I really like food.
Yeah.
So, and I get terribly upset if if I go to a restaurant and I'm given food which is plant-based and is of a poor quality. I get upset because I just think, oh, this is what gives us all a bad reputation.
Yeah.
Um, but you can get a bad meal anywhere you go, eating anything. So
Yeah.
that's
Even a
that's
grilled
just the way
cheese.
it is. But one of the things I think is so wonderful about food from all over the world is that it really is the spices that change or give a particular cuisine its profile, its color, its flavors,
Mhm.
and that really all comes out from the spices and how we flavor the food. Because the basic ingredients, I mean, you have some things that are a little more specific to particular regions. Yes, you have foods that
Mhm.
are, you have more in tropical areas or things that you have more in northern areas. But the basic food stuffs, wherever you go, are the same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so true. And another interesting thing that probably you have a similar point of view. When we study arts, I do remember one amazing teacher that I have, and he said, "Nunu, you always need to seek for good references.
Mm.
You need to be updated. You need to buy the magazine, see what the other architects are doing.
Yeah.
Like build up your references so you have more vocabulary to
Hmm.
be a good architect. Okay,
Yeah.
he said that's the only way that you will evolve as a student to become an architect is invest on your references.
Yeah.
And that was so important that I see that in so many different things in life,
Mm.
and food is exactly the same.
Exactly the same.
So if you don't have a good reference, what you think it's good or what you label as something, it will always be there's a strong correlation with your main reference. So I think when we travel, for example, that's one amazing way to expand our references.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like you go to have breakfast here in Portugal, for example, people see
Natas.
breakfast as you see it as pastries and bread and
Yeah.
things like that. And then you go to Istanbul, to Turkey, and you go out to have breakfast. And you see probably some of the ingredients not from breakfast in Portugal, but probably from lunch in the breakfast table.
Of course.
And those things, they just open up your mind to see, whoa, there's another way of having breakfast. And then you go to India, and then and so you go. Okay,
And
so
most of the world doesn't eat sweet things for breakfast.
yeah,
That's,
or
that's
even
very
bread
much,
related.
no,
Yeah,
it's a very Western thing. And you don't realize that until you go somewhere else. And then
yeah.
you realize. Also, I like, you were talking about references. And one of the things I've always been a very strong proponent of is if you like to follow, if you want references and you want to follow, cookbook or something like that, I don't personally recommend exclusively looking at plant-based books at all.
Yeah.
I don't recommend looking at books that are focused on health kick diets, because very often, although you might find a good recipe or two, my experience is that the food often doesn't taste that good. It's often very repetitive. Sometimes it's either not filling enough or it's too heavy. It's like my experience has been that if there is a chef whose food you are inspired by, look at what they do with plant-based foods, because most chefs are very interested. I mean, I think a great example is Ottolenghi.
Yeah, I agree.
He very early on did several cookbooks where he openly said, by the way, I'm not a vegetarian, but I love to cook so much with vegetables that I thought I should do a book. And then it grew. I think it actually started as a column in one of the newspapers, and a book grew out of it. And then 3 books came out of it. And, this is just one example, but if you look through most of his books, even the ones that do include fish or meat, the bulk of the book is not.
Yeah,
And he's a great cook. So that's where you're going to find really fabulous recipes.
that's true.
And I think that's the case with a lot of really great chefs, particularly if you want to, where they're really being experimental and trying different things. It's just a great way, I think, to
be
knock it
inspired.
up a notch or two,
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
raise the level. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Of course, when you are in a detox challenge like the one that will
A little
start
different.
Monday, it's a little different,
Yeah.
but having an approach, having that approach, you can adapt things, or you can choose the next recipe. Like the one is quite of
Yeah.
attractive, have something like deep fried, for example. Okay, even if it's just a topping, if it's just a topping, maybe for the detox, I'll do without the topping.
Exactly.
Next time, I'll repeat it with the topping because there's
Exactly.
something fried there. And yeah, having that new version of a detox challenge, it can be tricky, but at the same time, you can be really creative, right? Given
Absolutely.
your experience of in a detox concept, building that creativity in preparing food, and it seems like mathematically you're taking out ingredients, but you're just open up experiences and new
Exactly.
things, new
Yeah.
relations, right?
Yeah.
So tell me.
One of the things that I love about our detoxes are that we, you know, anyone who practices the Rose method knows that we're all pretty obsessed about food. I think that's just the basic starting point.
Yeah.
I really do. And so we're not just upset. We don't just, we like food because we really look at well, really high quality flavored food as being one of the fundamental principles of a well-lived life. And I think that this is, a method which is about having a better quality of life. I mean, it's one of the fundamental principles.
Yes.
And so with our detox challenges, that idea of raising our awareness in our preparation, in what's going into our food, in for a week, certain modifications and changes, but we're making those modifications and changes not to torture ourselves at all, but to give our system a break, just to let it really, and I think about it from this pleasure principle, which is, I've always used this expression, which is to try and build a life from which you don't need to go on vacation. And I think of our detox weeks rather than being these, even though we use the word challenge, I think about it very much as this pleasurable experience where you're really giving your body a bit of pampering. You're really paying attention to what's going on in your digestive system. You're really noticing the effect that certain foods have on your system.
Hmm.
And you're allowing your digestion to be sort of cared for with a level of attention that you wouldn't necessarily normally have. Um, and so I think of it as a very enjoyable and pleasurable experience
Hmm.
because also, I mean, the food tastes good. It's nice.
Yeah, yeah. And you discover new flavors. That's the thing,
Yes.
because if
Yes.
you
And combinations
overuse,
and
yeah,
things and yeah.
a simple thing, if you overuse salt, if you have a heavy hand when preparing your food and you put a lot of salt, if your references are mostly like restaurants that they normally put a lot of salt for endless reasons.
Salt and butter
Yeah.
because it makes everything taste good.
Yes. So when you take out the salt and then you start to find like the real flavor of a specific
Yes.
ingredient,
Yeah.
like for a plant or
Yeah.
whatever, you say, oh, this is kind of sweet or this is salty. Why do I put so much salt if the natural flavor of this is already salty? Kind of, I feel
Yeah.
it seems like there's salt in here, and I know that I didn't add nothing. So those things are quite incredible to expand our flavors and our
It does.
awareness of how to combine them later as well.
So we get these new combinations. We discover things that we perhaps like more than we had realized. And the other thing is I think that it allows the palate to come to life again.
Hmm. Yeah, you reboot your
You reboot. You absolutely reboot. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had a thing where if you've say done a week where you have not only no sugar, but really no, like you have no fruit for a week. And
Hmm.
then you eat something, you eat a piece of fruit. The power of the flavor is astonishing
Yeah,
because you've allowed your palate to sort of resensitize itself
hmm,
to flavor.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also the I think the satisfaction when you finish your meal. Okay, because I think also when you if you are very used to restaurants, like to have all the courses, including dessert and all of that, it's the default, is the expected meal, like to have all those
Mhm.
phases. And then suddenly you are realizing that probably it's just a social
It's just a social norm.
thing,
Yeah.
yeah, to have a dessert. If you finish the main course and you are satisfied,
Mm.
why do you need to add something
You
more?
can, yeah,
You can keep it, okay? You can hold
absolutely.
your horses, okay? Like, but if I'm satisfied, why should I change this satisfaction, adding something? No, uh, not this time. Not that I'm saying no to all of the
Right.
upcoming meals, but if I'm feeling that I'm feeling satisfied, maybe I'll stop here. Okay, it's quite an amazing way of
Mm.
changing paradigms, building up new references, and I think that's also the good side effects of a detox challenge is what
Absolutely.
happens next in terms of flavor, creativity.
Yeah.
Okay, I think creativity is one of the big gains of a detox challenge. And suddenly you have more options for your breakfast, more
Yeah.
options for a snack, more options for what to have in your car when you are commuting
Yeah.
and you have a long commute. Instead of having chips, maybe you have nuts.
Yeah.
a- and so on, right? And one last question, Amanda, regarding with students, clients, like coaching them in this world of nutrition, a healthier diet, or even making these challenges. Um, any anything that you like to highlight as that is important or that are useful tip that way you can share with others?
Well, my I would say that the biggest thing is that when you are working with someone and they want to actually make changes. Any change that someone wants to make has got to come from within.
Yeah.
Absolutely has to come from within. And then what you can really do is help them to understand ways that they can do it themselves,
Hmm.
how they can prepare, how they can think ahead a little bit, how they can have options. But those options really need to sort of come out of a discussion that they think about themselves. Because when you impose on somebody or tell them what to do, they don't generally really do it. They might do it
Yeah.
once, they might do it twice. Um, but our creativity really comes when we buy into, oh, wanting to do something differently ourselves. That's when we suddenly say, oh, well, maybe I could do it this way. And you try, maybe you don't like it, but
Yeah.
then you might be willing to try something else.
Hmm. And kind of pushing them to try, like
Yeah, curiosity.
have your own
Curiosity.
opinion, go
Yeah,
there, do it,
yeah,
learn with the
yeah,
experience, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Those are the things. Curiosity, in the case of a challenge like this, reminding themselves, let's just do one meal at a time.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we think, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that for a week. You don't have to think about it as being a week. Think about it just as being what the next meal is.
Yeah.
And then if you
That's
enjoy it
so
and you
great.
like it, then you do the next one.
Yeah. It's kind of being, how can I say, diplomatic with your meals.
Yeah, and I think have
Like,
fun with it. Have fun.
yeah,
I think when we have a playful approach to something, a creative approach, a curious approach, an enthusiastic approach, our experience of something is completely different to one which we see as being imposing, serious, repressive. Um, there's that. You could have exactly the same food in front of somebody, or exactly the same task for someone to do, or exactly the same, whatever it is, it doesn't matter if it's food or anything else. But the paradigm with which you are seeing something is going to impact how you experience it.
that's so true.
So if we think of
Yeah.
something as, it's fun, I'm trying something new, then
Hmm.
you'd be surprised, I think, often how what a good experience one can have.
Yes. Hmm. Very good. Amanda, thank you so much
Thank you, Nuno.
for your time and for your knowledge, for your point of view. It's always an amazing time that I have when talking with you.
Well, it's always fun. We
You
always have
always bring
great
so yeah, yeah.
great conversations. I'm always happy. I'm happy that I have you in my life. So
Likewise,
yeah.
likewise.
No, no.
Very good.
Okay.
So for those who are here watching it live or later as recorded, we have this enrollment for the Detox Challenge. It will be 7 days, having fun, being creative, and having the support of a community of all of those who are enrolled in this challenge. We are doing in two groups actually. One in Portuguese, since we are having a lot of enrollments from Brazil,
Mhm.
and the second one in English. I'll be the leader in the English side. And it will start on Saturday, this Saturday. I'm going to have a meeting with all of those who enrolled and share the program, share the recipes, have fun, Probably Sunday, I'm gonna have less coffee with them. A virtual coffee with them, like my last coffee, because Monday is no coffee day.
No coffee. I know. I'm in as well.
Yes.
it would be good for me to have a little coffee break. It's
Yes, and
just a
then
week. We
it's
can
just a
all
week.
do a week. Or as
Yes,
I always say,
yes.
let's just do one day. We can all
One
do
day at a
one day.
time. Yeah,
And then
yeah.
the next day. One day.
That's
Baby
that's it.
steps.
Yes, yes. And it will be virtual, of course. We will not be in the same place. It's not a retreat. It's kind of a virtual retreat. Each one will do their own recipes. There are a few guidelines, a few recipes to follow as main suggestions. And then we're going to have the group to help and support each other throughout the 7 days.
How we
Okay.
always do it.
Yeah, it's
The best
lovely.
way.
You're in. You're in.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm in. You know I'm
Yes,
in.
yes, yes, yes. Okay, so for those who are interested in joining us, just go to the link in our bio, and there's the enrollment process there with the prices, everything else, whatever you need to do. And there's also a button if you have any questions, you can always talk with us. Usually, Ligia, one of my teammates, will be there answering all of your questions. Once again, Amanda,
You
thank you.
know.
Thank you.
Great to
Thank you.
see
Thank
you.
you.
Great to
Great
see
to
you.
see you too. Okay. Have a wonderful day.
You
Here
too.
it's late. Bye bye. Huge kisses, Amanda.
Bye. I'm going to hang up.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.